What do you do when your guns fall silent over enemy territory and the enemy is still flying? For most pilots, the answer is simple. Break off, return to base, live to fight another day. But on December 20th, 1943, high above the frozen forests of northern Germany, a young American fighter pilot made a different choice. When his guns went empty, he didn't turn back. Instead, he did something so audacious, so unexpected, that it would become one of the most legendary decisions in the history of aerial combat. This is the story of Lieutenant Charles Charlie Brown and the B-17 bomber that should never have made it home. December 1943. The Allied air campaign over Nazi Germany was reaching its brutal crescendo. Every day, hundreds of American bombers, flying fortresses and liberators, thundered across the North Sea, bound for the industrial heart of the Third Reich. Their mission was clear: destroy Germany's ability to wage war. But the cost was staggering. In the skies above Germany, Luftwaffe fighters tore through bomber formations with devastating efficiency. For every target destroyed, American blood stained the frozen earth below. Lieutenant Charlie Brown was a 21-year-old pilot from West Virginia, flying his first combat mission as aircraft commander. His B-17F, nicknamed Ye Old Pub, was part of the 379th Bombardment Group, 527th Squadron, based at Kimbolton, England. Brown's crew consisted of 9 young men, none older than 25, all untested in combat. They had trained for this day for months, running through procedures until they could operate their aircraft in their sleep. But nothing, no amount of training, could prepare them for what awaited in the skies over Bremen. The target was Bremen's Focke-Wulf aircraft factories, vital to Germany's fighter production. Intelligence reports warned of heavy flak concentrations and aggressive fighter defense. Brown's crew understood the odds. 1 in 4 bombers didn't return from missions over Germany. Some went down in flames. Others simply vanished into the clouds, never to be seen again. As Ye Old Pub lifted off the rain-soaked runway that cold December morning, Brown gripped the control yoke and pushed the throttles forward. Behind him, his crew performed their final checks. In the waist gun positions, in the ball turret beneath the fuselage, in the nose and tail, young Americans prepared to enter hell. The formation crossed the Dutch coast at 0930 hours, climbing to 27,000 feet. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky was crowded with bombers. Hundreds of flying fortresses arranged in tight combat boxes, their contrails painting white ribbons across the winter sky. Fighter escorts, P-47 Thunderbolts, weaved protective patterns around the bombers, but everyone knew the truth. Once they reached the German border, the fighters would reach their fuel limit and turn back. After that, the bombers would be alone. At 1,045 hours, the P-47s waggled their wings and peeled away. Brown watched them go with a sinking feeling in his gut. Within minutes, the radio crackled with urgent warnings. Bandits, 12 o'clock high. The Luftwaffe was coming. The German fighters came out of the sun like swooping hawks. Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, their cannons blazing. The sky erupted into chaos. Bombers shuddered under the impact of 20mm cannon shells. Some exploded in midair, transformed into falling debris in an instant. Others fell away from the formation, trailing smoke, their crews bailing out into the frigid air. Brown gripped the controls as his bomber bucked and twisted through the flak. His gunners fired in controlled bursts, their .50 caliber machine guns hammering away at the darting fighters. The bomb run over Bremen at 1,215 hours was a gauntlet of fire. Black clouds of flak erupted around Ye Old Pub, each explosion close enough to rock the massive aircraft. Shrapnel tore through the thin aluminum skin, punching holes the size of fists through the fuselage. In the nose, the bombardier focused on his Norden bomb sight, tuning out the violence surrounding him. Bombs away, the B-17 lurched upward as 4,000 pounds of high explosives tumbled toward the factory below. But the nightmare was just beginning. As Ye Old Pub turned for home, a Focke-Wulf 190 came screaming in from 2 o'clock, its guns hammering. The fighter's 20mm shells ripped into the bomber's right wing, tearing through fuel tanks. Another burst tore through the cockpit, shattering instruments and wounding Brown in the shoulder. The co-pilot slumped forward, unconscious. In the back of the aircraft, men screamed over the intercom. The tail gunner was dead. The ball turret gunner was trapped, his oxygen system destroyed. The aircraft was dying. Ye Old Pub fell away from the formation, descending in a wounded spiral. Brown, blood soaking his flight suit, struggled to maintain control. The right wing was shredded, fuel streaming from ruptured tanks. The number 3 engine was dead, windmilling uselessly. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the windscreen. The bomber had become a flying coffin. At 10,000 feet, consciousness became a battle. The cold air rushing through the shattered cockpit revived Brown enough to level the aircraft, but he knew they were finished. Behind him, his crew worked frantically to save wounded comrades. The radio operator was hit badly. The navigator was trying to stop the bleeding from the co-pilot's head wound. In the waist section, men struggled to extract the ball turret gunner, who would freeze to death in minutes without a functioning oxygen system. The altimeter continued to unwind. 8,000 feet. 6,000 feet. They were too low to bail out, too damaged to maintain altitude. German soil stretched below them, no man's land for a crippled American bomber. Any moment, Brown expected the Luftwaffe fighters to return and finish them off. One more pass, one more burst, and it would be over. Then, at 4,000 feet, still descending, something impossible happened. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 appeared off their right wing, so close Brown could see the pilot's face. The German fighter was painted in the distinctive markings of JG-27, a yellow nose and fuselage band. The pilot wasn't firing. He was gesturing, pointing, flying formation with them. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler had been scrambling for his 5th kill of the day when he spotted the crippled B-17. The 27-year-old Luftwaffe ace had already shot down 4 Allied aircraft that morning. One more kill would earn him the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor. He pushed his throttle forward, angling for the perfect attack position. The American bomber was helpless, barely flying, easy prey. But as Stigler closed to firing range, he saw something that stopped his finger on the trigger. The tail gun was gone, blown away. Through the massive holes in the fuselage, he could see men moving inside, tending to wounded comrades. The rear of the aircraft was soaked in blood. This wasn't a bomber anymore. It was a flying ambulance carrying dying men. Stigler thought of something his commanding officer had told him years ago. If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. These men were as good as in a parachute. Their aircraft was destroyed. They were already dead men. They just didn't know it yet. Franz Stigler made a decision that defied everything about war, about duty, about orders. His guns were fully loaded. He had ammunition. He had the kill, but he wouldn't take it. Instead, he pulled alongside the damaged bomber, close enough that Brown could see his face clearly through the shattered cockpit glass. Stigler pointed downward, toward neutral Sweden, just minutes away to the north. He was showing them the way to safety. Brown stared in disbelief. A German fighter pilot, the enemy, was trying to help them. Through the fog of pain and shock, Brown understood what was happening. This pilot was offering them a chance. But Brown shook his head. Sweden meant internment. His crew needed medical attention immediately. Their only chance was England. Stigler nodded. If the American wanted to try for England, he would help. The Messerschmitt moved into a protective escort position. When they crossed over German coastal flak batteries, Stigler flew so close to the B-17 that the gunners below held their fire. They couldn't shoot at the bomber without hitting their own fighter. He was shielding them with his presence. For 15 impossible minutes, the German ace escorted the dying American bomber across the hostile coast. Brown wrestled with the controls, coaxing every remaining ounce of performance from his shattered aircraft. Behind him, his crew worked miracles, shifting weight, managing the remaining engines, keeping the B-17 in the air through sheer will. As they crossed the German coastline and headed out over the North Sea, Stigler came alongside one final time. The two pilots locked eyes across the void between them. Stigler raised his hand in salute, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another. Then he banked sharply right and disappeared into the clouds, back toward Germany, back toward a war that suddenly seemed more complicated than either man had imagined. Ye Old Pub crash-landed at Seething Airfield in England at 1,445 hours, nearly 3 hours after leaving Bremen. The landing gear wouldn't deploy. Brown brought the bomber down on its belly, the metal shrieking as it scraped across the runway. Fire crews rushed to the wreckage. When they pulled open the escape hatches, they couldn't believe the crew had survived. The aircraft had 21 major holes in its fuselage, including several large enough to walk through. Half the tail was gone. One engine was destroyed, another barely functional. Medical personnel who examined the aircraft later stated that it was the most heavily damaged bomber they'd ever seen make it back to base. The co-pilot and radio operator survived their wounds. The tail gunner was the only fatality, killed instantly during the fighter attack over Bremen. Charlie Brown was hospitalized for his injuries, but returned to flight duty 6 weeks later. He completed his tour of 29 combat missions and went home to West Virginia in 1944. Brown never forgot the German pilot who spared his crew. For decades, he searched for the man who had saved his life, hoping to thank him. He wrote letters, contacted veteran organizations, searched records. Nothing. The mystery pilot seemed to have vanished into history. Then, in 1990, nearly 50 years after that December day, Brown placed an advertisement in a fighter pilot newsletter. Within weeks, he received a letter from Canada. Franz Stigler, now an elderly man, had read the notice. He remembered that day vividly. The crippled bomber, the impossible decision, the salute across the void. He had never reported the incident to his superiors, knowing it could mean execution for treason. He had carried that secret for 47 years. The two pilots met in 1990, and a friendship forged in the chaos of war blossomed in peace. They remained close friends until their deaths, Stigler in 2008 and Brown in 2008, both passing within months of each other. Franz Stigler never received his Knight's Cross. He ended the war with 28 confirmed kills, but he always said that not firing on Charlie Brown's crew was the best decision he ever made. When a fighter pilot runs out of ammunition, the mission is over. But Franz Stigler's guns weren't empty. His humanity was full. In a moment when orders said to kill, when duty demanded destruction, one man chose mercy. One man remembered that before they were enemies, they were all just men trying to survive. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.